Our gospel reading comes from Luke chapter 22, verses 33 to 43. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, Golgotha, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by watching, but the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he's the Messiah of God, this chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Thanksgiving, what a wonderful time to have this. We all get to go and gather with our families and go and have a turkey dinner and be with people who we might not really want to be spending time with, even though they're family. I know that's not true for any of us, but sometimes it is true for other families. I've heard it so. And believe it or not, it's actually also true in churches sometimes. Sometimes people gather together with people that they really don't want to hang out with for an hour or two on Sunday morning, but they do it anyway. A little bit begrudgingly perhaps, but they hang out together and put on the happy face and have a little bit of fun. But Thanksgiving, and as we lead into the holidays, we are going to spend time with people who we really don't want to be with, because perhaps they've done something to us. Perhaps how they've wronged us or done something that we just plain don't agree with. And maybe they've done something really to hurt us, or it could be just something that we perceived as a little less favorable. And so we just don't want to be with them. But at this time, Jesus says these words to these people who are killing him, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do," as he's dying. Well, it is at this time when things get stirred up more than any other, especially when a family is going through the dying process with a loved one. And after that person dies, I remember when my grandma died, sisters who got along so well were just fighting and bickering at each other over what they were going to do with the estate, how they should do it. Sometimes it was over people feeling entitled to receive certain property and items, and at other times it was just a matter of them not feeling that the other person was going about the process correctly. And so all of these problems started to arrive. This bee's nest got stirred up. Jesus, while he's dying, asks for the forgiveness of these people. And the Dr. Ira Byrock, who is head of a hospice unit at Johns Hopkins, he said that there are four main things that come out of people's mouths, and even for those who don't say them, that should be, when there is a time of dying: not fighting, not backbiting, not people getting after each other because they don't agree. He said, no, there should be 4 sayings that people should say. Will you forgive me? I forgive you. Thank you. I love you. And Jesus ties this message together. We could sit there and say, it's easy for you to say. It's easy for you to say to forgive people. Everybody says forgive and forget, let bygones be bygones. But we have to remember that as Jesus is saying these words, he's got spikes through his wrists in boards. He's hanging from a cross. Despite that, praying to God, saying, God, forgive these people, for they have no idea what they're doing. And so we're also called, for those people who are in that dying process, to realize that there's a need for reconciliation, but yet people will say, forgive and forget, and let bygones be bygones. Well, how ridiculous is that? How possible is it for us to really forget what somebody has done to us? It's not possible. The theologian Paul Tillich said that forgetting is the process of forgiving despite the fact that we will always remember. Another wise theologian, or maybe not, Lily Tomlin, said that forgiving is giving up all hope for a better past. I'll say that again. Forgiving is giving up all hope for a better past. You imagine what it would feel like to have the burden lifted off of our shoulders, to forgive somebody, and even attempt in some way to forget what has happened, maybe literally and maybe figuratively. But to have that burden released off of us as we say, I give up all hope that things in the past could have been better, because they're not, because they're done. And what a perfect time to remember this as we gather with our families this Thanksgiving, and as we head into that holiday season where we're going to be spending a lot of time with our family members. There is a story that I recently heard about forgiveness. A woman, what was her name? Mary Johnson. Mary Johnson and O'Shea Israel are neighbors. And O'Shea is in his 30s, Mary, she's in her upper 50s. And they'll meet each other in the yard, and they'll chat and whatnot, and she'll say, boy, you never came over and asked me about taking out my garbage. And she'll just razz him a little bit. But she helps to pay for his college. In fact, she calls him son. But see, they're not related by blood. Well, kind of. You see, O'Shea is the one who almost 20 years ago murdered her biological son. When they were young, they were at this party, young gang members, strong, carrying guns. Nobody could defeat them, out to face the world. And they get into a scuffle at this party, and O'Shea pulls a gun and kills her son. 12 years he was in prison before Mary finally said, you know, I have decided that if I keep holding this grudge against you, if I keep holding this anger and resentment and bitterness inside of me, it's going to kill me. And it's enough that one person is already dead. We don't need another. And so she went to that prison, and she met him behind the glass. And she said, I wanted to see you. I wanted to see who you are. And he told her, the fact that you're here, I now see your son as a human being whose life that I took that day. They forgave. They were bonded together in a bond that's more special than any of us could ever imagine. I cannot even fathom forgiving somebody who killed a child of mine. But she sat there and said, today, you are my son. She lived up to that. So when he was released from prison, she helped him buy a house next door to hers. And she became the mother that he never had. And he became the son that she would never have again. But they made that conscious decision that forgiveness would be their testimony. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around. Well, what happens when we forgive? What happens when that burden is lifted? Somehow I think we discover paradise. You see, we're not on edge when we go near those people anymore. We're not wondering what they're going to say to take us off. We're not wondering what kind of words that we can use before we set them off. No, we're not walking on eggshells anymore. We're relaxed. And we're okay with the idea of being around these people. And somehow, in some way, I think that we discover a little taste of paradise. And so as this man asked Jesus, let me be with you when you come into your kingdom, Jesus turned to him and said, today you will be with me in paradise. Mary Johnson was in paradise when she was finally able to give up her hurt, her anger, her resentment. It's not that she forgot. It's not that she hid it under a rug and never talked about it. She still tells Israel that son that I had naturally is gone now. And so now you are my son. She didn't pretend it never happened. It happened. But she forgot, she forgave, despite all of that. As I was looking over our Advent study in that book by Marcus Borg, he has another book called The Parallel Sayings of Jesus and the Buddha. And so I'm reading through these, and this scripture actually had a parallel with it. And so I looked at this sutra, and I'm reading over it. It was really quite interesting. This man named Angulimala, say that 10 times fast. Angulimala means, mala means garland, and Anguli means fingers. So he was the man who wore a garland of fingers. This bad man who carried all these swords and knives and daggers, and he went around just killing people randomly. And he would keep their fingers as a souvenir. How's that for yummy? I hope we don't have wafers today, because, yeah, never mind. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But one day, supposedly, the Buddha was walking along this path, and these people said, Angulimala is over there. You don't want to go down there. He's killed 20, 30, 40 men at a time, all by himself. Don't go that way. But he didn't say anything. He kept walking. As he kept on going, he'd meet more people, and they said, Blessed one, don't go down there. You're going to get yourself killed. This man is crazy. But he just ignored him, kept his mouth shut, and he kept walking. And finally, as he walks along, he passes Angulimala, and Angulimala starts to chase after him. But for some reason, he just comes to a stop. And the Buddha's still walking, and he says, Angulimala, stop. And the man says, what do you mean stop? I'm not moving. You're the one still walking. How can you tell me to stop? And he said, I stopped. I gave up evil a long time ago. I learned how to forgive a long time ago. But you still hold resentment and anger and evil. And you need to stop. And so this man's eyes were opened, and he took all of his weapons, and he went to a pit, and he threw them in there. And he says, today I renounce all killing and all evil. And he said to the Buddha, he said, when a foolish man's eyes are opened, when an angry person releases their burdens, it is like the bright moon being uncovered from the clouds. Think of that imagery. Think of the imagery as we set an example with our forgiveness, as we set an example of living life that is about embracing people despite the things that they have done to us. How brightly would we shine? How brightly would we shine in our own churches, in our own families, in our own communities, if we were able to release the things that burden us, to give them back to God, and to say, today, I have become your son, I have become your daughter, and to ask God to forgive people, regardless of what they've done to us. Because Jesus said, when you do this, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. It is my prayer and my hope that all of us in some way or another can be able to discover, can be able to taste, can be able to experience paradise here on this earth because we're able to free ourselves from the anger and resentment that we carry toward others. Let it be so. Amen.